our young men and women in our armed services and their families, those who have understood the sacrifices that they have made on behalf of our great nation. But, Mr. Speaker, I also rise to speak out in strong opposition to President Bush's misguided escalation of troops in the Iraq War, and to commend the Democratic leadership of this House for holding a real debate on our involvement in Iraq. Since January 3rd, when Speaker Pelosi took the gavel, the Democratic majority has delivered on its pledge of oversight and accountability of this war in Iraq, and Democrats have changed the direction of the discussion and have changed this war to lead us to the ultimate goal of all Americans, that is to bring our troops home. For too long, Congress has taken a back seat on the President's handling of this war. But this majority has held more hearings on Iraq than Republican-controlled Congress did since this war began. This debate is not about trying to embarrass our President for political purposes. We are debating the escalation because the American people have demanded a change in direction. The President has failed to recognize the will of the people and many of the top military and foreign policy thinkers around the country who view this escalation with little hope of success. Our constituents spoke with their voices loudly on Election Day, and they have been even more vocal since about the dissatisfaction with the way this war has been managed. Many in this country want to see a de-escalation of America's forces, not the increase the President has proposed. The President and his advisors created this problem, and it is now on the Congress to find the way to disengage from Iraq without causing the country and the region to be engulfed in further outbreak of violence. In the last week, we have seen some of the most horrific bombings that cost the lives of hundreds of Iraqis and the downing of several U.S. helicopters. Over 3,000 of our young American men and women have lost their lives. Tens of thousands have been physically and mentally maimed. And hundreds of thousands of Iraqi citizens, the vast majority of them trying to live normal lives, have been killed or injured. This is not how this war was to be conducted. 4 years ago, when this President came to Congress for authorization to invade Iraq, he stated that Iraq posed a clear and present danger. He talked about how invading Iraq was part of the greater war on terror, and how if Saddam Hussein was not toppled, he would attack our allies and maybe even our own soil. After seeing the death and destruction al-Qaeda did to my city on 9/11 and to our nation, I wanted to trust our President and all the President's men and women. When I sat across the table in the Roosevelt Room in the White House from Condoleezza Rice and then CIA Director George Tenet, I thought I could trust them. Because of them and the false intelligence they gave, I voted for authorization of this war. As the only member of this Congress to lose a relative on 9/11, and as someone who has lost 125 constituents to the attacks of the Twin Towers, I do believe that America must always act to defeat threats before those threats act against us. As they say in life, there are no do-overs, and if I could turn back time, I'm sure that most of the members of this House and most of my colleagues in this House would never have given this President this authority to wage this war in Iraq. This war has cost us a fortune from our national treasury, a fortune in American lives, lost and ruined a fortune in our ability as a Congress to trust our Commander-in-Chief and our President. Today we have an opportunity to stand as a group and to say what our constituents want us to say what the Army generals want us to say what many of them, those men and women in our armed services in uniform who are on the front line want us to say. Mr. President, adding more troops is not the answer. Adding more troops to fight what has become a civil war is not the answer. The answer we need to start beginning is to begin to bring our troops home, reducing our presence in Iraq, and create the conditions for the Iraqi people themselves to stand up and secure their own country. The Iraq Study Group set out a plan that many of us support, but the President continues to believe that history will judge him favorably. As the Iraqi government attempts to clamp down on the Shia and Sunni militias, it has become abundantly clear these forces are not as strong as we have been led to believe, those being the Iraqi government. I believe we need to look strongly on redeploying our troops in Iraq along the border and in the Kurdish north, and removing American citizens from harm's way in Baghdad and Anbar province, and forcing the Iraqi both politically and militarily to secure these areas. U.S. troops should only be used in an advisory role, not in direct combat in these
Gentleman's
major
time has
points.
expired.
Mr. Speaker, let me just reiterate, I have more that I will submit for the record, but I want to see our young men and women home as soon as possible and an end to putting them in harm's way, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's